Welcome everybody in these sessions. So today we will discuss about the API communications and authentication using Angular 10. For that purpose, we basically today's sessions we will define basically using these sessions to develop a mean struct based application using MongoDB, Express, AngularJS, and Node.js, through which we can I will demonstrate how we can establish a API communications and authentications in AngularJS. Okay, so let's start the session. So I'm Debasis Saha. I am actually Microsoft certified trainer and SysUp Corner MVP, and also as a MinStack specialist and as well. I'm working as a lead engineer at Wi-Fi Soft. And for if anybody wanted to contact with me, they can connect in my following handle. So in today's agenda, we will first doing creating an Angular CLI project in Angular 10. Then we'll set up an Express app for API operations and develop an API endpoints so that we can operate through database server to the API endpoints. Then we will using HTTP requests and routing through Angular to fetch those data and display in the Angular applications. We will create an Angular service to wrap the HTTP request so that we also need to write down the every applications. Then after it, we will implement GWT authentications in the application so that nobody can access the applications or API endpoints without any proper authentications, and pass those JWT tokens for authentication purpose to the API request. And for sending the JWT token or generate the JWT token, we will implement a user logging interface in the product applications. And then we will send the JWTs to the API request form to Angular UI for authentication. So before we starting, basically it is a practical oriented session. So before we going to the start the practical demonstration, just a little bit discussions about the mean. Mean basically stands for four different applications. One is MongoDB, and another is Express, and then Angular and Node.js. So MongoDB is basically operate with the database systems. Express is basically provide us the backend web framework, which operates for the backend purposes. Angular is mainly used is a framework which is mainly used for the front-end framework, and Node.js is basically provide a backend runtime environment to operate for Express and Angular, so that Angular can communicate with a backend web framework like Express and fetch and retrieve data through the MongoDB API. So let's start the first step of the our project structure. So first we'll create a new project using Angular CLI. Then we'll include some extra packages for required to implement in the main project. And then after it, we'll connect to the Mongo server using Express and develop a Initialize API to insert some basic data in a MongoDB for test the connection establishment. And then we create the database connections environment and prepare the script to insert initial record and then execute the initial script to insert. So let's go back. So this is a simple product applications which I call the product catalog, where different product names will be displayed. For that purpose, I have already created a blank Angular 10 project using Angular CLI. Say all other libraries are using the Angular 10. So after creating the Angular 10 projects, I include the following new packages within the Angular library project or Angular CLI projects. These are the packages which is required to implement the MinStack project using the Express and MongoDB. So Bigcrypt, I'll give you some little intro about these new projects or packages. So Bigcrypt is basically the one type of cryptic package for encryption or decryption purpose of the password. The body process is required to access the body data for any type of post or put type operations in the API endpoint. When we operate any post or put type of data, that at that time we need to fetch retrieve the body data using the body person. Code.js is provided the Express.js in a Node.js environment. .NET ENV is provided .NET environment of the .NET platform. Express is basically represent the Express app. Express JWT and JSON Web Token is a representative of JSON Web Token, which will be implemented later on in this demo. MongoDB is providing the Mongo library for operator database server, and npm run all is basically provide us an environment to run the both backend and front-end services at a time and simultaneously with a single command. Okay. So for that purpose, we are using this. So this is a in the SSC folder. I have created two different folder. One is client. This client folder contains all the applications files related to Angular, and within the server folder, we will store all the files related to the Express app. Initially, I have created two folders. Which one is the images folder, which contains some product images, and within the sample data folder, I have created two files, JSON file, which contains some dummy JSON data related to products and users. Okay. Now let's start. Now first we need to insert some initial record. Now the first objective of us is to insert this record in the Mongo database. Okay. So let's copy the sorry. Yeah. I include some files. So these are the files has been modified. One file has been added that is called .env file. Is basically it is this file is basically we are using for the environmental purpose. Within this file, we will store the database connections informations and JWT token secret. So initially, JWT token secret is not required. So I'll remove this part. And within the rest two key, I'll created one is DB connect con and another is a DB name. I need to create a database. We will access the store the data in the MongoDB as the name of the database is product catalog. And this is the credential of my local MongoDB servers. If we are using any other MongoDB server, that URL need to be provided here. So first, need to create a blank database in the Mongo server with this name. So just copy this name and I'll open the Mongo Booster. This is my local MongoDB server instance. So I'll create a new database here. So right click and create database. So this is the new database which does not contain any collections or any data. Now return back to the applications. Here we need to insert, create. Here I'll create a new file called Initialize Db.js. Now, what I have done in this file. First, we'll import the .NET environment using the required JS, which is import or inject this in .NET environment key values within this file. And then we'll use this import, create an instance of a MongoDB client using the required Mongo. And also you using the BigCrypt package or instance for the password management. At the same time, we create the constants related to the user and product data by reading the user.json file and product.json file. Okay. Now here we will create a method or functions called Initialize Db Record. Within that functions, we'll pass the parameters called collections name, on which collections it will be inserted, and the data collections data variable name within it. Within the functions, we first create a Mongo client by passing the Mongo connections server URL, which is basically this one. Okay, to process.env.db underscore cons, and then we'll connect the server. After connecting the server, we'll start inserting record. If this collections has contain a password properties, then it will decrypt the password and store it in the database. Okay. And yeah,
Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you. Is it possible you
yeah,
can just increase your font size, or
yeah,
it's not visible to the viewers?
yeah, definitely. Now, is it visible?
Yeah, a little more maybe, or you can just zoom it, Control plus plus. I don't know if that works.
Yeah, I'll actually zoom in.
Maybe increase the font size. I don't know. I mean, it's a little challenging to see. I don't know why.
Yes, actually there is a zooming option. I actually zoom
Thank you everyone who has reached out to me in the comments, and I know it's a little blurred. It's tough to see. Yeah, I definitely agree. It is blurred. Hmm, why is it
Still it is
blurred?
still it
The,
is
the, the
black.
screen is quite blurred. Color is also a problem. Okay, so you won't be able to see that. I guess I'll have to remove it.
Uh,
Okay, maybe you won't be able to see your screen. So
okay.
so if you'll have to go back, try to go back to StreamYard once again. Oh, sorry, in the Visual Studio. I think it's better now. It's better now. If you could increase one more time, it would
Okay.
be great. Okay, it's
Now?
fine. It's fine. Yeah, nah, it's great. It's great now. We're good to go. I know it will be a little challenging for
Okay.
you to
Good.
code it.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry
no,
for
it's
the
okay.
interruption.
It's okay.
Okay,
No, no,
go
it's okay.
ahead.
Thank
It's
you.
all your session now. Thank you.
Yeah. So within this section, we'll first using the connections and then we'll analyze the data. If the data contains any password property, then it will be encrypt the data with the hash sign by using the bigcrypt tool, and then it inserts the data in the collection using the insert menu statement. Okay. So at the end, we execute these two methods by passing the collection's name as a parameter and with the related variable name under which we store the data. Okay. So now return back to the command prompt. We need to execute just a little bit font. I'll increase the font size. Yeah. So now I'll go back to the command prompt and I need to execute this command so that we can insert those records. For executing these initial records, we need to run the command npm run samples. So why will I'll run this command? I'll show you. In the package.json, I have created an extra script command that is called sample, and it will execute the sample data.initialize.db.js file. So that's why I'll executing the command that is npm run sample. The sample is the keyword which is mentioned in the package.json file. If we change this keyword, then the command will be automatically changed npm run and then the keyword. Okay. So just go back to the npm run sample. It will start initializing the command. But time it's second few seconds to establish the connection. So database connection has been established and it start inserting records. First it will insert the two records for related to the users and then it will insert the 10 records related to the product. Now closing connections. Okay. So stop the run and return back to the Mongo DB server. Just little bit zoom out. So now I just refresh the Explorer and there the two of collections has been created. So product contain 10 records and users contain two records. If I browse the record within that, so the record has been inserted with the password encryption tool. Okay. So this is the first step which you need to perform, that insert the basic record using the Express app. So we'll initialize the records and insert the basic record within the record. Now return back to the presentation file. So in the second step, we'll create some CRUD API related to the products so that we can fetch data or save data using those API. Then we'll test those APIs endpoints using the Postman, and then we'll create a product list component in Angular part so that we can fetch those data record and display in our component page or in our applications. Okay. So return back. I'll just copy the content. So first we'll need to create the CRUD API. For that purpose, I'll insert or added a new file called index.js under the server folder. And within that server folder, we are creating different CRUD API like get. One is the grade API for fetching the records of the product slash API slash product. And another API slash for post to insert the new records. Okay. So for that purpose, we'll create an constance or instance of the Express app and then create a app of the Express package. We'll create a Mongo client instance, similarly just previous file and body parsers for accessing the body part of the post request. And then we are using the path variable so that we can access the image path here. And then first we initialize the DB connections to connect the MongoDB. And then we'll create two API endpoint. One is app.get slash API slash product, which is request as a parameter and send. So which is basically fetch the record, collect the database and find the record for all. If we want to pass any conditions, those conditions can be passed through this. And then it will return the cursor as a JSON to the return point. Okay. Similarly, we can mm, create another post API through which we can insert the record, insert one. If there is an error, it will throw an error inserting record, or otherwise it will insert the record and pass us the 201 status code. Okay. Now we need to test this API. So for that purpose, we'll just go to the command prompt and I'll run npm start. Or say I'll just want to test the API part, so I'll run npm run server. So I'll now just I want to test the server API part. That's why I'll just run into the server. So it will running in the 3000 port. The database connection is ready. That means our initialize data. This part has been called because database connection is ready. Message is thrown from this API. So this has been called, and now it will open in the 3000 port. So return back to the postman. I'll come to the postman and pass the API endpoint and click on the send method. So to check either the record has been retrieved or not, yes, the API is working and it will return the record. So in the record, we have a item name, category, price, quantity, and also a photo URL which contains the image file path. So that's why we are using this path variable to access the path file name directive so that we can display the images in the front end. Now return back to the client folder. Within the client folder, I'll opening the app folder. Here I'll add some new components. Here first I have used a product interface which contains the definitions of the product, that is item name, category, price, quantity, and photo URL, etc. for defining the product entity. And similarly, I'll create two different components. One is product component, which is basically display the product informations of any single product here. And then I'll create another component called product list, which is basically display the list. Within the product list, I'll use the product component. See here. So this is the list. So here we are using a ng for loop, and within the ng for loop, we'll iterate every product. We'll pass the product value to the product component. so that further information can be displayed. And then I'll add those component references in our routing modules for the product list components in the routing modules and pass the product as a default route, and also add those component informations in the app.component module so that when we run the applications, it will display the product. Okay. Now let's go back to the command prompt and stop the server. And now npm start. So npm start command is basically start both the backend service and the front-end service. So when we run the npm start, it will start the backend API port within 2004, and at the same time, it will start the client applications or Angular applications in the 3000s port. So first, for the first time, it will take some little bit time because it will using the ng build to build a product and then implement. So fractions of some more time is required to start the build process because it compiles the express apps and then checks the entire app. Okay, let's go back to the presentations and until it will be executed, we'll discuss in the next part. So in the next part, we'll just create an product additions at product UI through which we can add our new product components, and then we'll implement the client side route and the save data in the post database using the post API. Okay, start compiling. For some CSS style, I am using the semantic CSS pattern. You can download that. It is a free library which can be downloaded from the semantic sites, and those CSS has been added in the project also. So it will generate the bundle, and then after compliance, it will open in the port. So let's go back to the browser and run localhost. So it will fetch the record and display in the browser. So maybe there is some design issue or the pattern. The CSS is not looks good. So just I'll show that either it is fetching these records or not properly. So I'll open the network tab and hit the refresh button. So this is the product API details, and it will hit the localhost product 300 3000 endpoints, and it will return the result to us. So our fetch API is working now. At the time, we need to add new product using the add product button. So for that purpose, I'll simply add 4 files in the application. So it is that product. I'll include two components. One is the add product components, okay, which is basically contains the add product folder and some CSS related this, and then add dot component product within the route, add product route, and the add module component. Okay. Now just stop this application and Again, it's run. It will rebuild the applications. So back to the where I'll simply so there is a new button has been appeared. It is called Add Product, and once we'll add any product URL, we can add the product URL here also. Okay. So suppose I need to pass any add new URL. Just a second. I need to copy one image path from there. Sample data. Nokia.jpg. Say I'll say Nokia 10, the mobile category. I'll put any price, quantity, and slash images. Yes, okay, the product has been added. It will display, and now when we go back to the home page, it will display the new added item. So this way we can add the new product, and also in if we go back to the database and refresh the database collection, so it will now it will be displaying the 11 items. So new one item has been added in the product collection. Okay. So in the next step, we'll display how we can. So till now we will communicate with the HTTP request. So also we can implement the Angular service to implement that HTTP call, and along with we will implement the Express router in this application. So just I'll go to little further for the shortage time. So yeah, replace it and Express router server. Okay. So return back to the Visual Studio Code. First, I'll display how we can implement a API wrapper service. So there, I'll create a API Angular service, and for that purpose, we are using the base URL using the environmental variables within the application, which is stored here, like API URL. I have stored there API URL for accessing the API endpoint, and now we'll define the subscribe function, that is post, get, put, delete, and then pass the common method logis here, so that from any component or service, we just need to inject this service and pass the API call for that purpose. So related that, we will make the changes in the product list or add product components. So here I'll inject the API services and inject the API HTTP service as the API service, and just call the HTTP service get method by passing the route name of the API. Okay. So this way we can use the wrap for functions, and similarly in the server side, we'll create one method called API router.js file, which is basically contains the some same code type of code of the which is written in the previously in the index.js, and within that file we will create the separate API routers for get and post, and export that API router to the as a module.export, and then we'll create express app within the file create express app.js, where we'll inject the API router file and pass that API router file within the express app. So we'll just simply bifurcate the index.json entire code in three different files. So creating in the API router as a separate file and create express app so that we can properly implement the GWT token in later on. Okay. So after executing this, there is no changes in the application because it will remain same. Just we pass some wrapper services within the applications. So now it's time to implement the GWT token. So GWT token is basically the API route, which why we are using GWT tokens, because our API routes is currently are not locked down. We can access the data from anywhere. So that's why we require some authentication keys. And normally GWT token or JSON Web Token is one of the standard mechanism for accessing T. It will be using the industry standard RFC 7519 pattern that is save and compact. Okay. So for that purpose, what we are using, simply copy the environmental file. So in the environmental file, we will pass the JWT tokens here. This token is this is basically the JWT key that can be accessed, and then within the API router method, we use this method to check the proper JWT access is given or not. So router.use check JWT. It's a check JWT is a package under the express JWT method package, and which is check the either it is API contain a request contains a valid JWT token or not, which is otherwise it will return to the API authentication method. API authentication API endpoint is basically using to generate the token used from where we collect the username and password as the username password, and we find the username password in our Mongo collections. If it is found, then we match the password. If it is matched, then it will generate the payload as the user token. Otherwise, it throw the error. Okay. Now return back to the Postman, since previously we get the data from using this pattern. So now if we click on the send request, it will till now showing the same record because we does not stop the server or rebuild it. So I'll just run the npm run start. Meanwhile, we'll just copy the logging form until copy it. What? Where is the error zone? Oh, sorry. Copy the whole file. Yep. Mm, which file is given? Module, sorry. So there is a naming conventions error in the app module file. No, it's correct. So what happened? What? Yeah, just a second. One file needs to implement it. Many folders in the file. So after implementing JWT token, what will happen? So when we call the API, it will show us that authentication token is not valid. So for that purpose, we need to pass the token. So for Postman, from Postman, we can generate the token using the username and password. But from UI, to generate a token, we need to implement the logging form so that when user logging in the system, that token has been created and stored in the auth service so that the token can be passed in the API endpoint request. Okay, so it will, yeah. Now it's activated. So now I'll click on the send. So now the error is shown that no authorization token was found. Okay. Now we need to call this authenticate username password. So pass the token, and this is basically the post request, and I'll pass the username and password within this token request. So it will generate me the token, and once I'll copy this token and pass in the header part of the this API request as a bearer token, then only we can retrieve the data. Okay. The same pattern we need to maintain in our UI case also. So for that purpose, I have added one logging form component, which is basically accept username password. And within the shared folder, we are implemented need to implement some one method service called JWT Interceptor, which is basically intercept all the HTTP request and push the HTTP push the authorization header token within that request. So in this way, we can parse the JSON HTTP header request within any HTTP request without making any changes in the main HTTP file or HTTP call. So HTTP interceptor is doing intercept all the HTTP requests and pass and inject the extra parameters within the header. And for authentication purpose, we'll create the auth service. Within the auth service, it will store the set token. I have three methods. One is set token and another is get token. Set token store the token value when it is generated, and at the time of fetching the token, it will call the get token method. Will return the token value. This get token method will call from the JWT in interceptor service to retrieve the token and pass the token in the bearer. So now return back to the applications. So now there is a logging form, and we'll user provide the username password, and I'll click on login. Yes. So now if we going back to the memory part of the applications part in the browser, and there we'll store the token value PWT product manager token, which is stored in the session storage. Okay. So in the network part, if we click it and click on the refresh button, say I'll click on the add product, or click on the refresh button, it will read out the product question, product API, and in the request part, we can see that it will send the request, sorry, this one. So it will send the GW token as the authentication token part in the API endpoint so that it can be accessed from anywhere. Okay. Similarly, we'll implement another service that is called AuthGuard so that nobody can access any routes from any other URL. Suppose I'll show it. This is the AuthGuard we have implemented so that if user is logged in, then only it will be accessible. Otherwise, it will not accessible. It will return back to the logging form. I'll just show you the demo. Suppose I just copy this URL and click on logout. Now I'll click on the part here and directly click on So it will redirect me to the user login. Okay, just going back to the password. If we provide the password, and now if I copy it and paste it in the another browser window, then it will automatically logged in because since we are already logged in the applications, that's why it will check in. So in this way, we can implement the JWT token in our Minster applications. So we can test the API using the Postman, add authentications, and for add logging component to implement JWT token. And also we can implement the logout functionality. So that's all from my end for this session. So any